Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They thought they were storming a terrorist's lab. Instead, they shattered a quiet home and a woman's skull. No warrant, no warning, just a tip from a power-hungry HOA queen with a grudge. What followed was a war for justice, revenge, and the right to feel safe in your own home. I woke up that Saturday thinking it'd be just another quiet morning, coffee, maybe a bit of sanding in the garage, and then working on that battery array I'd been meaning to finish. My wife Amanda was already up. I could smell the hazelnut roast she always made too strong. I muttered something about sleeping in, dragged myself to the bathroom, and stepped into the shower without checking my phone. Warm water, steam, and silence. That's what I remember. I stood under the shower head for maybe 15 minutes, just letting it all melt off. I didn't hear the doorbell. I didn't hear the knock. I didn't hear the engine hum of an armored van pulling up outside our gate. What I heard, too late, was the crash. By the time I stepped out and toweled off, Amanda was already on the floor. At first, I thought we were being robbed. The house was filled with shouting, heavy boots on hardwood, furniture crashing over. I came around the corner, still dripping, and found Amanda screaming, bleeding, her arm twisted underneath her, face swollen, eyes wide with terror. She was lying by the edge of the hallway, between the living room and the bedroom, and over her stood two men in full tactical gear, with rifles pointed in every direction but the right one. I instinctively ran toward her, but froze when I heard the click of a safety. One of them spun toward me, gun up barking, "Get down!" On the floor. Where's the workshop? For a second, I thought I was dreaming, or dying. Nothing made sense. My body froze, towel half fallen off me, water still dripping onto the floor. Another one shouted, "We have a positive address, move to the back." I dropped to my knees, hands raised, trying to keep my eyes on Amanda, who was crying. Barely. Her voice sounded off like it didn't belong in the house anymore. I could see bruising already forming along her cheekbone. Her hair was stuck to her face, wet with sweat, or blood, or both. "I'm unarmed. This is a mistake," I shouted. Someone grabbed my shoulder and threw me forward into the floor. My face hit tile. Cold tile. Behind me, I heard them yelling something about explosives and homemade detonation devices. They swarmed through the living room, kitchen, back patio. One of them kicked open the garage door like he expected to find a meth lab. Instead, he found my workbench, 3 drone batteries, a pile of scrap aluminum, and a soldering iron. And they didn't care. The one who'd thrown me down kneeled beside me and started rattling off questions like I was some kind of terrorist. "Where's the lab? Are you working alone? Who else is involved?" I kept repeating, "You've got the wrong house. You've got the wrong guy." Then one of them radioed something in, and I saw his face change slightly, confused, then concerned. He walked toward Amanda. I tried to push myself up, but someone kept their boot on my back. Literally. Another shouted from the garage, "Just tools and batteries. No sign of chemicals. Might be a false positive." False positive. Amanda was wheezing now, trying to breathe. Her wrist was clearly broken, bent in a way bones aren't supposed to bend, and she had a cut across her forehead that was bleeding into her hairline. I yelled again, louder this time. "She needs a medic. She didn't do anything." Nobody responded. I don't know how long it took before they realized their mistake. It could have been 30 seconds or 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. Then, silence. I heard one of them mutter something into his radio. Another said, "Call it in. We need an ambulance." I finally got to sit up. They didn't apologize. Not one of them. Instead, one by one, they started backing out of the house, like they were just moving on to the next scene, leaving behind a wrecked living room, a bleeding woman, and me, barely clothed, and trying to figure out what the hell just happened. Amanda was barely conscious. I held her hand, trying not to shake. I asked her over and over again what had happened. She just kept whispering, "I thought it was a delivery." That's when I remembered the front camera, the living room camera, the one I set up years ago and never took down. The one that probably caught all of it. I grabbed my phone with shaky fingers and pulled up the app. It had recorded everything. The timestamp showed the front door being kicked in. The voice yelling, "Go, go, go!" Amanda's scream. Then the crash of the glass table, which one of the officers had knocked over onto her with his leg while holding a half-spilled coffee cup in his other hand. My wife, bleeding on our hardwood floor, while a guy with caffeine breath tried to save face. They had no warrant, no knock, no identification, no attempt to verify the address. They just came in. guns drawn, like we were the target. Like she was the enemy, like I wasn't even a person. They left us both on the floor. They only called the ambulance after I started shouting again. No explanation, no badge numbers. Nothing but a name muttered by one of them as they left. Silver Valley complaint? Probable cause. Don't blame us. Silver Valley. That was the name of the HOA next door, the one we didn't belong to. The one that had tried to fine me last year for not having approved mailbox paint. The one where Karen Satterfield ruled like a suburban god. I looked down at Amanda, her eyes barely open, and I knew. This wasn't just a mistake. Someone sent them. The ER smelled like bleach and blood and burnt plastic. Amanda was somewhere behind a curtain, hooked up to machines, her wrist in a temporary cast, her face pale under fluorescent lights. I sat in the corner, still in the same gym shorts I'd thrown on after the paramedics arrived, my bare feet stuck slightly to the vinyl floor. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. They gave me some forms. I didn't read them, just signed where they told me to. Eventually, someone asked if I'd like to speak with the sheriff's deputy who came in to document the incident. I said yes. What I meant was, I'm not leaving this room until someone answers for what happened in my goddamn house. He arrived looking like he'd just come from brunch. Beige uniform, tidy mustache, pen clipped to his collar. "Mr. Linwood," he asked, like we were at a customer service desk. "Do you want to explain why my wife's skull has staples in it?" I said without looking up. He blinked, then cleared his throat. "We've reviewed the operation report. The tactical team was responding to a credible tip regarding suspicious activity at your address." "Credible tip from whom?" I asked, standing up. Because unless you've recently redefined suspicious activity to include charging drone batteries and drinking coffee, someone just weaponized your entire goddamn department. He looked uncomfortable. The tip was submitted through a formal HOA channel from Silver Valley Reserve. It listed your property as the suspected location for homemade explosive devices and possibly illegal surveillance equipment. I actually laughed. It came out broken. "Illegal surveillance? You mean the camera that recorded your guys nearly killing my wife?" He ignored that. The concern came from a member of their board, Karen Satterfield. Apparently, there were multiple previous complaints. Yeah, I cut him off. Multiple bullshit complaints. She's been trying to push us into their HOA for over 2 years. We're not part of it. We've got the deeds, the maps, even a court ruling from last year after she tried to cite me for having solar panels. He looked caught off guard. "You've got documentation showing you're not part of their association. Do you want me to tattoo it on my chest?" I snapped. "Yes, I've got the county land survey, the zoning maps, everything. You people didn't check a damn thing." He scribbled something in his little notepad, clearly trying not to get dragged into it. "I'll include that in the report, sir." "You're not going to include anything unless I shove it into a lawsuit," I said, pointing at the IV stand next to Amanda's bed. She was drinking tea and answering the door, and now she might need surgery to fix her face. He tried the bureaucratic line. "We deeply regret the harm caused during the response and—" "Spare me. Regret is when you drop a cup." This was an armed raid based on a phone call from a woman who thinks mailboxes should match the trim on her porch. He left soon after, said someone from the ATF would follow up. I never saw him again. When I got back home that night, the house still smelled like mud and fear. I walked through the mess in silence. Door off its hinges, sofa flipped, my workshop in pieces. I stood there, in the garage, staring at my tools. Nothing fancy. Nothing illegal, nothing even remotely explosive. Just batteries, wiring, and a couple of prototype drone parts I'd been tweaking. I opened the drawer where I kept the documents. Everything was still there. My deed, the HOA exemption notice, the court ruling from 2 years ago, the denial of jurisdiction from the county board, even the cease and desist I'd sent Karen last fall when she tried to send compliance inspectors to our fence line. And still, they'd kicked in my door. I checked the security footage again. The camera caught everything. You could hear Amanda's footsteps as she walked toward the door, the bell ringing, her saying, "1 second," and then, boom. Door gone. Frame splintered. A man yelling, "Clear!" The camera from the living room showed her thrown down like a rag doll. The coffee table shattered when one of the officers tripped, his knee smashing straight into Amanda's temple. And then came the line I was waiting for. One of the officers, pausing in the living room, looked back at the others and muttered, "You sure this is the address? This looks off." Another answered. Orders came from the deputy directly. Said the HOA had evidence. I hit pause. "Deputy, Direct order from the top. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk with my laptop and started backing up every file I had. The footage, the documents, the messages Karen had sent to my old HOA email before I blocked her. Even the handwritten note she left in our mailbox once, which read, "It would be easier if you joined voluntarily. We don't like having outliers." Outliers. The next morning, I called my old friend Lena, an attorney I met years ago when she was handling a zoning case for a mutual friend. She now worked federal cases, big ones, police misconduct, civil rights violations, that kind of thing. She answered on the second ring. "Mark, you okay?" "No," I said. "I need you to come see what they did." She arrived 2 hours later with a paralegal, a camera, and a notepad. She toured the house, took statements from both me and Amanda, who could barely speak through a swollen jaw, and by nightfall, she'd made her first few calls to the county, the state AG's office, and a civil liberties watchdog she used to work with. In D.C., when she was done, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said the words I hadn't dared think. "We're going to sue them into oblivion." I nodded slowly, then asked the only question that mattered. "And Karen?" Lena smiled. "Oh, we're coming for her too." By Monday morning, the video had already gone viral. It started small. Someone from the hospital staff must have leaked the footage, maybe a nurse, maybe a tech. But within hours, it was everywhere. YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, the local news. A woman in pajamas flung to the ground by armed agents. A man screaming in a towel. A coffee cup crashing mid-raid. And the voice, clear as day, asking, "You sure this is the address?" The title on one clip read, "Wrong House, Wrong Family. Meet HOA Tyranny." By lunchtime, I was getting interview requests from everywhere, CNN, NBC, even some guy running a YouTube law channel in his basement. I declined them all. I had only one priority, Amanda. She was still in the hospital, barely able to open her mouth, her hand wrapped like a balloon, her eyes distant. Shock hadn't worn off. If anything, it was settling deeper. Lena, meanwhile, moved like a heat-seeking missile. By noon, she had subpoenaed the sheriff's office for all communications with the Silver Valley HOA. Then she hit the county for their emergency procedures, specifically the ones that allowed an armed raid without a warrant. The answer came back within hours. No such procedure exists. The raid had been approved under an emergency verbal authorization signed off by Deputy Commissioner Paul Renner, second in command at the county law enforcement office, and, according to Lena, an old golf buddy of someone we know. I didn't have to ask who. Silver Valley Reserve wasn't just any HOA. It was one of those upscale, gate-happy wine club communities with more bylaws than residents. You know the type. Manicured lawns, zero street parking, security guards in golf carts. Karen Satterfield had been running it like a suburban dictatorship for the better part of a decade. She wasn't just the president. She was the founder, the enforcer, the queen. And for the past 2 years, she'd been trying to get our property annexed into their HOA like it was a territory dispute. The only problem? We had legally opted out when the development was built. Our land sat just outside the plotted boundary line, grandfathered in, protected by county zoning. But that didn't stop her. First, it was community harmony flyers in our mailbox. Then letters citing unsightly installations, my solar panels. Then came the more aggressive stuff. HOA inspectors taking photos over the fence, emails warning of escalating action if we didn't engage with the board. I'd shut it all down with paperwork. That's the thing about bullies. They hate being outpapered. I had the signed exemption, the surveyor's report, and even a court ruling from the zoning board confirming we were outside their jurisdiction. So instead of more paperwork, she escalated to paranoia. Lena found the complaint Karen had filed. It wasn't anonymous. It was typed, signed, and submitted directly to the county with official HOA letterhead. It claimed that I, Mark Linwood, was constructing non-commercial electrical units of unknown function, that smoke was observed coming from detached structures, and that potential residents report hearing explosive sounds during nighttime hours. She even attached photos, low-quality, zoomed-in shots of my garage, my tool bench, and, in one laughable instance, a smoke trail from a barbecue I'd fired up on Memorial Day. Explosive activity, my ass. There was also an email sent from Karen's HOA account to Deputy Renner, marked URGENT. It read, "We believe this property may be tied to unauthorized weapons activity. Residents are concerned. Please act before it becomes a tragedy." Renner responded 4 minutes later, "Understood." Will prioritize. No warrant, no inquiry, just will prioritize. We had them, and it got better. Lena dug through the county's complaint database and found that this wasn't the first time Karen had cried wolf. There were at least 4 prior complaints over the past 3 years, all involving homeowners who, surprise, surprise, were not part of the HOA. One of them, a retired couple down the hill, had spent 6 months under zoning review because Karen accused them of running an illegal tree-cutting service. Their crime? Letting their grandson chop firewood for a summer job. Another had been investigated by animal control for allegedly breeding attack dogs. The dogs were therapy labs. Karen had a pattern, and now, with Amanda's blood on the hardwood, a consequence. Lena sat me down at the kitchen table that night, pulled out her legal pad, and began drawing a war map. We're filing 3 claims, she said. 1 against the county for authorizing a violent raid without warrant or due diligence. 2 against the HOA as a corporate body for harassment, fraud, and malicious prosecution. And 3, she tapped her pen, against Karen Satterfield personally for criminal defamation, reckless endangerment, and conspiracy to abuse municipal authority. Is that even possible? I asked. Not only possible, she said, but with the video, the emails, and the pattern of false complaints, it's winnable. Especially if we go federal. That's when she dropped the number. Conservatively, you're looking at a settlement north of $3 million. If we go to trial and win, closer to 5. I didn't say anything. Money felt meaningless. Amanda couldn't sleep through the night without waking up screaming. She flinched when the doorbell rang. She couldn't brush her own hair without pain. But I nodded. Let's do it. The next day, Lena filed the lawsuits. Karen was served during an HOA board meeting. I heard she cried. By Wednesday, everything had changed. The lawsuits were public. The footage was national, and Silver Valley Reserve was suddenly the most notorious HOA in the country. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Journalists, lawyers, neighbors, people I hadn't spoken to in 10 years were all reaching out. The story had landed on the front page of USA Today. A headline in The Atlantic called it, "Suburbia's War on Its Own." Amanda had finally been discharged. Her wrist was in a rigid brace, her jaw wired, her eyes stayed distant. I wheeled her through the front gate in silence. The house still looked like a war zone. She wouldn't go near the living room. I couldn't blame her, but Lena was relentless. She'd turned our dining table into a command center. Legal pads, 3 laptops, chargers snaking across the floor. We had affidavits from 3 other neighbors already. One man, Ed Torres, said Karen tried to accuse his teenage son of petty arson for lighting sparklers on the 4th of July. Another, the Ashfords, had a letter from 2021 where Karen warned that their non-HOA behavior would be corrected by structural compliance. The woman was unhinged, and now the world was seeing it. But the real blow came from inside the system. A whistleblower. Lena got a call from a junior county clerk named Rachel. She didn't want money, didn't want fame, just wanted someone to know the truth. She'd overheard Deputy Commissioner Renner and Karen planning the operation. Rachel had been working in the records office when Renner came in with what he called a problematic parcel, ours. Karen had provided a modified property map showing our lot as unclaimed common land, a term Lena later called complete legal gibberish. Renner apparently asked no questions, just nodded and said, "We'll get it sorted." Rachel gave us a copy of that altered map. Lena placed it next to our official county survey, and the fraud was obvious. The HOA boundaries had been redrawn, by hand no less, to swallow our property like some expanding blob. Lena's voice turned to steel. "We're not just suing anymore. We're pressing charges." 2 hours later, she filed a motion with the state attorney general requesting an investigation into HOA misconduct, fraudulent land claims, and unlawful deputization of county force. That same evening, Renner was placed on administrative leave. A photo of him being escorted out of the county building in a windbreaker went viral. The caption, "HOA cops gone wild, Silver Valley started to eat itself." Karen released a statement through her attorney, calling the raid an unfortunate misunderstanding and claiming she acted on community safety concerns. But that didn't explain the map, or the emails, or the fact that the HOA had used dues money to hire a private investigator last year who'd left a GoPro duct taped to our mailbox. We found it. We turned it over. Amanda sat silent through most of this, scribbling notes on a legal pad with her good hand. But that night, she asked to watch the footage again. She made it exactly 45 seconds before she had to leave the room. The next day, Lena got the green light. The AG's office would open a formal investigation. She smiled like a lioness. Now we get subpoenas. Karen's financial records, HOA expense reports, board communications, everything became fair game. And what Lena found made even me stop. Over the past 3 years, HOA funds had been used for surveillance equipment, private investigators, anonymous tip line fees, gifts for compliant residents, a wine basket for someone who turned in a neighbor's illegal shed, and most damning, a personal donation to renters' community campaign fund. The web was unraveling. I stepped outside that evening and saw someone had spray-painted HOA equals fascists on the wall of the Silver Valley Gatehouse. Someone else had hung a cardboard sign from the fountain, "Free the Outliers." We weren't alone anymore. But the real tipping point came 2 days later. Lena was at the courthouse, Amanda asleep upstairs when I got a knock on the door. A man in his 60s, balding, quiet. He introduced himself as Gregory Holtz, former HOA board member. Said he'd resigned 6 months earlier. Said he had something I needed to see. He handed me a USB stick. "I warned her," he said. "Told her she was crossing lines." She laughed. I plugged it in. Meeting recordings, HOA Zoom calls, emails between board members, notes from a community enforcement initiative, a program designed to encourage integration of non-HOA parcels. The tone was pure cult. Neighborhood health depends on uniformity. Resistance must be met with structured consequences. Karen had even used the phrase, "domesticate the outliers." That night, Lena stayed up till 2 reviewing the material. She emailed the AG's office, then the press. By morning, we were front page again. They say justice moves slowly. Not this time. By the following week, the Silver Valley Reserve HOA was in full collapse. The state attorney general had issued subpoenas to every board member. County inspectors rolled in with clipboards. The IRS even showed up, sniffing around for misappropriated nonprofit funds. Karen, once the queen of the cul-de-sac, was nowhere to be seen. According to gossip, she'd holed up in a rental cabin 2 towns over, claiming political persecution. I had to laugh at the irony. She finally left someone else's property alone for once in her life, but things didn't exactly calm down. We started getting letters, dozens of them, from people we didn't even know, victims of HOA harassment from other states. Some just wanted to say thank you. Others wanted to share horror stories, fines for wind chimes, lawsuits over mailbox colors, citations for unauthorized flower beds. One woman in Florida told us her HOA banned garage doors visible from the street. Another man in Arizona said his HOA fined him for parking a wheelchair ramp without architectural approval. They weren't just letters, they were ammunition. Lena used them to bolster our civil suit, arguing that what happened to us wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a larger trend of HOA overreach. The media ate it up. The HOA wars became a recurring segment on morning shows. Our story was the flagship, but more were emerging. It was like we'd cracked open the dam. Meanwhile, Amanda was slowly, painfully recovering. Her jaw unwired, the swelling receding, the bruises fading, but her nerves were frayed. She startled at loud noises, flinched when someone walked behind her. She wouldn't go near the bedroom where it happened. We started sleeping in the guest room. I caught her crying once in the kitchen, clutching a fork like it was a weapon. I felt helpless, furious, useless, so I focused on what I could control. I rebuilt the front door myself, reinforced the frame, added security cameras, mounted a smart lock, installed motion-activated lights and flood sensors. It wasn't just about safety anymore. It was about taking the house back. Then came the depositions. Karen was dragged in first. Not literally, but it might as well have been. She showed up in oversized sunglasses and a designer scarf like she thought the press would swarm. They didn't. Just one stringer from a local paper and a guy live streaming on TikTok. Lena questioned her for 5 hours. Calm. Surgical. She walked Karen through every lie, every forged document, every abuse of power, the altered map, the fake tip line, the email to Renner. At one point, Karen tried to claim she had limited oversight of the HOA's legal operations. Lena pulled out a copy of the HOA's bylaws. Article 3, Section 1. All legal complaints must be reviewed and approved by the sitting president. That's you, right? Karen blinked. I suppose so. You suppose? Lena asked, raising an eyebrow. Karen went silent. The transcripts made great reading. But the real moment, the one that shifted everything, came 2 days later. I was at the kitchen table with Amanda, coaxing her to eat something besides toast, when my phone rang. It was Lena. "Check your email," she said. I opened the file she sent. It was a scan of an internal HOA memo recovered from Karen's home office during a court-mandated audit, dated 3 months before the raid. Subject: Compliance Pressure Protocol. It listed 5 non-compliant properties that bordered Silver Valley Reserve. Ours was number 3. Next to each name was a list of escalation measures. For us, it read: deny construction permits, initiate code violations, surveillance, anonymous safety complaint, pressure local PD through board liaison, Paul R. There it was, a premeditated plan with names, dates, and steps. I showed it to Amanda. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at it. Then she asked, "Do we win now?" I didn't know how to answer, because this wasn't about winning anymore. It was about burning the whole rotten structure down. By the time the grand jury convened, the air in Silver Valley had changed. Gone were the golf carts. Gone were the trimmed hedges and chirpy morning walks. The HOA board had dissolved in a mess of lawsuits and resignations. The fancy newsletter, once filled with brunch invites and lawn awards, had become a ghost of itself, reduced to a single PDF titled Emergency Financial Update, which read more like a confession than a report. They were bleeding money. Legal fees, court sanctions, investigation costs. One by one, homeowners started selling. The prestige community sign at the front gate disappeared overnight, but Karen still hadn't been arrested. Not yet. Lena assured us it was coming. The DA was building a layered case: civil rights violations, fraudulent reporting, reckless endangerment, falsification of public documents, misuse of nonprofit funds. The raid had become a national example of everything wrong with unregulated HOAs and the cozy relationships between local government and private boards. A segment on 60 Minutes used the phrase "militia in pearls." Then came the call we'd been waiting for. "Grand jury's done," Lena said. "Indictments coming tomorrow morning." Amanda and I didn't cheer. We didn't cry. We just sat on the back deck and watched the sun sink behind the broken gate. At exactly 9 the next morning, Karen was arrested at her cabin. The footage went viral before lunchtime. 2 U.S. Marshals escorting her out in a baggy sweatshirt and Crocs, sunglasses slipping off her nose, hair undone. The charges were read aloud as she was loaded into the car. She looked stunned, like the universe had glitched. But it didn't end there. Renner was arrested the same day, charged with conspiracy, abuse of authority, and evidence tampering. His deputy, Paul R., was already cooperating with prosecutors, singing like a canary. In one transcript, he claimed Karen promised him a future board seat and preferential HOA placement for his cousin's new housing development. The corruption went deep. HOA meetings, it turned out, weren't about neighborhood watch and pool schedules. They were about power. Who could be pushed out? Who could be bought in? Who fit the aesthetic? Amanda's injuries had just been the final crack in a rotten wall. The criminal trial was still months away, but the civil suit moved forward fast. Lena added new claims: intentional infliction of emotional distress, coordinated abuse of governmental process, unlawful invasion of privacy. The judge didn't just allow them, he expressed sympathy during a pre-hearing conference, said the footage from our living room made him physically ill. Meanwhile, we were offered settlements, not small ones. First came the HOA's insurer, offering expedited resolution to the tune of $1.2 million. We declined. Then the county itself, $2.5 million. Lena leaned back and said, "Tempting, but they'll offer more once Renner testifies." The pressure was mounting. Amanda was on the cover of Time. Not a photo shoot, just a still from our security footage, blood on her lip, dazed and bruised. The title, "Home is Not Safe Anymore." That's when the fundraisers started. Not for us, for others. Victims of HOA abuse from around the country began sharing their stories. A class action suit against a different HOA in Nevada used our case as a legal precedent. Law schools started debating quasi-governmental overreach. And Lena? She was offered a book deal. Still, there were moments of quiet. One night, Amanda and I sat by the fire pit. Her wrist was healing, but her nerves were still raw. She asked me, "Do you think we'll ever feel safe again?" I didn't answer right away because I wasn't sure. Even after the arrests, the headlines, the lawsuits, something lingered. The knowledge that someone could knock on your door, pretend to be authority, and destroy everything because they felt entitled, because you didn't belong. But we had one more move left. The final hearing. The judge called it a procedural formality, but it was more than that. It was a statement. Amanda stood with her arm still in a brace. I wore the same shirt I'd had on that morning of the raid. Lena handed over the full list of damages, physical, emotional, financial. She finished with a single sentence. My clients were attacked in their own home by armed agents of a lie. The room was silent. Then the judge nodded and signed. $3.8 million, not just from the county, but from Karen personally, from the HOA's liquidated reserve fund, from Renner's forfeited pension. Amanda didn't smile, but I did, just once. You'd think $3.8 million would feel like a victory. But honestly, it felt more like a funeral settlement, like someone finally admitting, yeah, we ruined your life. Here's some cash for the mess. It didn't fix Amanda's trembling hands when a car backfired. It didn't erase the dent in the hardwood where her head had struck the floor. But it did give us power. And power, for the first time in this whole nightmare, was back in our hands. We didn't move. Not yet. We thought about it, sure. Maybe heading out to the coast, somewhere without neighbors who vote on the color of your mailbox. But Amanda said something one night, while sipping tea with 2 fingers still splinted. If we leave now, it's like saying they were right. So we stayed, and we built. I cleared the garage and turned it into what it was always meant to be, a proper workshop. Nothing dangerous unless you think a miter saw and a soldering station are weapons of mass destruction. Amanda helped me set it up despite her injuries. We even joked about putting up a sign, warning contains tools and reasonable property ownership. The HOA was gone. The gate was taken down. The remaining residents voted to dissolve the charter entirely. Some of them came by in person to apologize. A few were genuine. Most just didn't want their names in headlines. We smiled, nodded, accepted baked goods, then tossed them in the trash. I wasn't in the mood for banana bread diplomacy. Then one afternoon, about a month after the final verdict, I got a call from the DA's office. Karen had taken a plea deal, 12 years. No parole for at least 8. She broke down in court, reportedly. Cried about how she never meant to hurt anyone. Claimed she just wanted the community to be safe. The same woman who forged documents, manipulated officers, and created a literal protocol to crush her neighbors now wanted pity. The judge wasn't impressed. Called her actions a civilian act of state-sponsored violence under the mask of community duty. When the sentence was read, Amanda sat in silence. Then she whispered, "Good." But not everything was closure. The media kept knocking. Journalists, documentarians, podcasters, they all wanted our story. Lena filtered most of them, but one made it through. A young woman with a small crew and a big heart. She interviewed Amanda gently, asked about the noise, the fear, the silence after. She didn't ask about the money, just about the people. That footage aired 2 weeks later in a short film titled Line in the Gravel. It was raw. It was painful. It was honest. And it ended with a shot of our new front gate. Simple, wooden, handmade. On it, a metal plaque. Not part of any HOA. Entry by warrant only. Amanda laughed when we bolted it on. Subtle? I shrugged. It's a start. We installed more cameras, upgraded the alarm, added a wide-angle thermal scope that covered the backyard. People called us paranoid. I called it post-traumatic clarity. But slowly, the silence returned. Amanda planted flowers again, ones that once got her a passive-aggressive HOA warning for being non-native. I helped her, kneeling in the dirt, shoulder to shoulder. The bruise along her jaw had faded, but the memory hadn't. Still, her hands were steady this time. And one morning, while sipping coffee in the workshop, I got an email from Lena. She'd forwarded a news alert. Sheriff's Department issues new policy after raid scandal. No warrant, no entry. It wasn't justice, but it was something. Sometimes a crack in the wall is enough to bring the whole structure down. It was a quiet Sunday when I finally stood alone in the room where it had all begun. The bedroom. The door had long since been replaced. Oak, reinforced hinges, digital lock. Amanda never stepped foot in it again, said she didn't want to remember the sound it made when it shattered, but I needed to face it one last time. There were still faint scratches in the floor, too deep for sanding. The spot where her blood had soaked into the rug had been scrubbed, bleached, replaced, but I still saw it. Every detail of that morning played in my head like film stuck on loop. The screams, the boots, her face, my towel slipping to the floor as rifles pointed at my chest. They wanted to find a bomb maker. They found a man with a beard and a Wi-Fi signal. It took time, but Amanda and I started living again. Real living. Not the twitchy, half-awake kind of existence we'd been in for months. I still jumped when someone rang the bell too hard. I still flinched when official envelopes came in the mail. But it was different now, because I knew where the line was. And I knew exactly what would happen if someone ever crossed it again. Amanda started teaching art again, virtually at first. She even painted a series called Impressions of Impact. Abstract, haunting, beautiful. One of them ended up on the wall of Lena's office. She said it helped her explain to new clients what a lawsuit really meant. Not about money, about memory. As for Lena, well, she didn't stop at us. She founded an entire nonprofit, HOA Watch, took our case and turned it into a movement. She toured law schools, advised on state legislation, and helped push through 2 new bills in our state alone, one that limited HOA powers over non-member properties, and another that restricted emergency raids without double verification. The funny thing, Karen tried to appeal her sentence. Didn't go well. The appellate court shredded her case in under 5 minutes. The judge actually laughed when her lawyer tried to argue community fear justified misinformation. I suppose the fear belonged to her now. We didn't throw a party, didn't pop champagne. But one night, Amanda and I sat under the stars, a fire crackling between us, and toasted with quiet glasses of wine. She rested her head on my shoulder and said, "You were right. We did win. Not in the courtroom. In our home, where no one ever again would burst through the door because of a neighbor's lie." There's a final detail, though. I kept the camera footage. All of it. I backed it up 6 times on encrypted drives stored in different places. Not because I think we'll need it again, but because deep down I know what people are capable of when they convince themselves they're in the right. The old mailbox is still there too, dented, crooked, a silent monument to every warning letter they shoved into it over the years. I don't fix it. I want it just like that. So if someone ever drives by again looking for trouble, they'll see it and remember, this is where the lies ended and where the line was drawn.